He is concerned that Labour are using this report to cover their plans to increase taxes.
What concerns me about the way that Labour is seeking to report this report is that they seem to be chasing headlines. Lord Darcy is a very respected, eminent surgeon. Of course, he is also, it's fair to say, a former Labour minister and a former Labour peer. But this report should be about what the state of the NHS is and providing solutions. And what worries me is that Labour is using this report as cover for the tax rises they plan to raise on us all at the budget in October.
And finally, sport. Great Britain finished runners-up in the Paris Paralympic medals table following a total haul of 124. The figure, second only to China, comprised of 49 gold, 44 silver and 31 bronze, with GB securing titles in 18 of the 19 sports entered. Britain ended today with 2 more golds and 2 silver medals. His Majesty the King earlier sent his heartfelt congratulations to Paralympic, GB and Commonwealth athletes for their numerous success at the Paris Games. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening. Who would be a pensioner in 2024, watching a country that they love and helped build quietly unravel? Disorder on the streets, antisocial behaviour and a health service on its knees at exactly the moment when someone later in life needs it. Meanwhile, the glories of our past, with victories in 2 world wars, the ending of slavery and the exporting to the world of parliamentary democracy and free markets, have been replaced with a narrative that a country to which our pensioners have spent their life contributing, including their taxes, is in fact a wicked post-colonial superpower with a shameful history for which we must atone on a daily basis. Even a trip to the gift shop or cafe of a National Trust property won't spare you the tired message that Britain is a belligerent, intolerant hellhole with an evil past. Now, Britain has always been diverse, and immigration has helped make this country what it is. But current rates of legal migration are seeing cities the size of Leeds or Liverpool grow within a year, when previously it took 100. Which means that the Britain that our pensioners know and love is changing beyond recognition at a rate which places undue strain on public services, housing, the economy and our infrastructure, not to mention the delicate alchemy of integration. Our pensioners are watching Britain turn from a successful, diverse society into a failing multicultural experiment. The parents and grandparents of today's pensioners fought with their lives to protect our national boundaries during the Second World War, only for their children and grandchildren to watch our national boundaries breached on a daily basis in the Channel, in what has become an economic, humanitarian and national security disaster. Meanwhile, every weekend during the so-called peace marches following October the 7th, ideological thugs hold banners calling for a holy war and chant anti-Semitic slogans unpunished. At one point, the cenotaph, which is there to remember our war dead, who gave their lives for freedom and democracy, became a backdrop for extremists seeking the wiping out of Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East. Who would be a pensioner in 2024, having been needlessly locked in their homes during the wild experiment of lockdowns during the pandemic and left to rot in care homes? Britain's elderly were among the worst hit by the cost of living crisis and are now the target of Labour's swingeing cuts as they plug the £9 billion cost of pay rises for train drivers and junior doctors. And how are they going to do that? By allowing 10 million pensioners, 2/3 of whom are living in poverty, to shiver in their homes this winter. Now, stopping the boats would save £3 billion a year. That's double what the government is saving on the fuel allowance cut. But Labour, of course, have ditched Rwanda, and with it, the only deterrent we had. And whilst illegal immigrants should absolutely be accommodated as well and as safely as any other Brit. How ironic that the radiators in migrant hotels will stay on this winter as British pensioners sit at home with 3 coats on, wearing mittens, deliberating whether they can afford to put the kettle on, let alone the heater. Even Labour's own MPs are up in arms about the cut to the winter fuel allowance. Rachel Maskell, the MP for York Central, warned of the public health impact of the cuts. She said, "We know that being cold leads to stroke, heart attacks, pneumonia, hypothermia and so much more as the body wrestles to keep warm and viruses prey on the frail." Last winter, she says, 4,950 people died because their homes were cold. The fear is that if we withdraw winter fuel payments for those in fuel poverty, it will lead to excess deaths. Meanwhile, Ed Miliband's net zero plans were going to shave £300 off people's energy bills, except that they've now stopped quoting that figure. Can't imagine why. And energy is going to go up 10% this winter. And £300 is the exact amount that they're taking off 10 million pensioners. Make it make sense. And things could get even worse for pensioners, with Angela Rayner considering hammering up to 4 million pensioners by removing their council tax break for single occupancy. Now, before the election, I predicted on this show that we would have 5 years of civil war within the governing Labour Party. Well, several MPs have already been suspended for voting against the 2-child benefit cap, with more Labour MPs set to abstain this week on the winter fuel allowance vote. Even Labour loyalist and Keir Starmer's biggest cheerleader, LBC host Carol Vorderman, is feeling the heat. Take a listen to this angry caller.
I'm incandescent about it. I couldn't have believed that a Labour government would have ever done anything so iniquitous.
Carol looks uncomfortable, but it gets worse.
There will be more pensioners that die of hypothermia this winter or malnutrition, because there will be people who are having to make choices between heating and eating.
Poor Carol's rendered speechless as the caller finishes her demolition of this new government, for which the former Countdown Queen campaigned.
Why clobber pensioners? I think they will pay for this at the next election, because we will never, ever vote Labour again, and we voted Labour all our lives. We will never vote Labour again.
Really, that's significant for you and your partner.
I just think it's so iniquitous, so unfair. I really can't believe that a Labour government have done this. They turned themselves into the new nasty party, or the even nastier party, because even the Tories didn't do this.
This is a national scandal. Pensioners have given everything to this country, and now they're being left out in the cold. Well, for reaction, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Annunciata Rees-Mogg, journalist and broadcaster Michael Crick, and former Tory MP and farmer Neil Parish. I should say that Annunciata is part of the Popular Conservatives, if that's not a contradiction in terms. Great to see all three of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Annunciata, hot-footing it from the west of England. Lovely to see you. First of all, why have Labour picked this fight with pensioners, do you think?
The only reason I can think of is that proportionately the older population are less likely to vote Labour. And it's very clear where Labour are putting their priorities, that they can afford pay rises for unionised groups, such as train drivers, and they are cutting from those who desperately need help, the elderly, and particularly the single elderly.
What I didn't mention in my big opinion monologue, Neil, is that the reason why they're having to make these cuts is because of the right haulics that the last Conservative government made of the economy.
I think they have chosen to cut the winter fuel allowance because I think they wanted to decide that let's look after the younger people and let's sort of target pensioners. The trouble we've got with pensioners is that many of them are very proud, that many of them that could actually draw pension credit don't. And so therefore, you know, this is going to really affect them badly. And of course, whatever the state of the economy is, Mark, that we didn't say pay the public sector unions all the money, the train drivers and all of these things. So why is it? Why
would have had to settle.
Yeah, but
there would have been a deal and it would cost money.
But why is it that pensioners that can ill afford and will will freeze, putting it bluntly, this winter. Why should they pay for things that Labour are doing? They didn't put that in their manifesto. Also, you see, like I said, the single occupancy, there's many pensioners who have got perhaps quite a lot of capital, may live in quite a big house, but they've got no money. And I think, you know, I just don't think Labour understands what pensioners have to go through.
Michael, some would say this smacks of strong government, strong leadership, and a Prime Minister in Keir Starmer that won't flip-flop and won't U-turn.
Well, he'd certainly like to give that impression. And it's going to be very difficult for Starmer or Reeves to come up with a significant U-turn because it looked like they failed at the first fence, and they can't have that. But I do think they need to find some other ways of lessening the burden of this cut for poorer people. Let's face it, I mean, despite your diatribe at the front there, pensioners are better off probably in this country than they have ever been.
Would you say a portion of them?
Well, quite a lot of them. I mean, in that we're living longer. Neil and I are both pensioners. We're living longer. We have a variety of activity. We have foreign travel. We can. Many of us are still able to get jobs in into our 70s, even 80s at times. So it's a very mixed picture here, and it's ridiculous that people like us should be getting winter fuel payments or even free travel on the underground when at a time when poorer people really do need the money.
But you see, that the point that I need to make on this is that by the time you try and single out those that should get it, they'll then have to set up a special scheme to help those pensioners that are just outside the benefit system on pensions. And so then, in the end, they will save very little money, a great deal of cost of administration. And what we always decided to do, which I think was quite right, if you paid it to everybody, those that didn't need it, they got it taxed away from them.
Annunciata, briefly, if you
the
can.
pensioners who want to get the credit have to fill out 243 questions.
Yeah.
This is not a straightforward thing, particularly for those who are not tech savvy in the first place, the generation who are technically least tech savvy.
That's right.
But also, 13,000 is not in anyone's books well off. They deserve that money. They have put into the system all their lives, and they should be able to be rewarded for their commitment to our country. But by means testing, often it actually costs more.
It does.
Than you save by taking it away from the multi-rate.
A couple of seconds. I've been given a hard out by producer James, but I just want to ask you very briefly, should the Conservatives apologise for the financial black hole? Are they disingenuous to complain about these cuts, yes or no?
I think the Conservatives made it clear that our finances after COVID were in a terrible state.
Politicians
However, we are growing faster than the rest of the G7 and actually have a better
outlook. Are you willing to say sorry for the terrible black hole that Labour have been granted and bequeathed?
Because I'm not going to. I think there are problems with the economy, but I'm not going to accept Labour's position on it because they're over-egging the pudding. That's what they're doing, Mark.
My teenage son calls that, which is sorry but not sorry.
That's probably true.
That's right. Robert Jenrick surges ahead of Kemi Badenoch in the race for the Tory leadership, according to a bombshell new poll amid accusations of dirty campaign tricks. Could this contest tear the fractured Tories further apart? We'll debate that next, and let me tell you, fireworks will be flying.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Luke Douglas Hugh is a plogger. It's the act of jogging and picking up litter at the same time.
I thought it had something to do with cycling, but I was thinking of recycling. You better explain what the term is.
Plogging originates really as an expression from Sweden, from someone called Erik Alström, who combined the two words of plocka in Swedish and jogging, so plogging.
And what does plog uppa mean?
Picking up.
Oh, I see.
Oh, I see.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Do you take a bag with you or something and you pick up rubbish? There you go.
Absolutely, yeah.
In terms of being a jogger, how do you combine the two? Because joggers wouldn't want to
keep up the pace,
Yeah, they wouldn't want
you?
to keep stopping to pick stuff up, would they?
I'm the coastline runner. I run the coast collecting plastic pollution.
Which
mainly.
coast?
Well, I've done the whole of the East Coast, from Lowestoft to Leith.
Wow.
And then cut across from Edinburgh to Glasgow on the Grand Union Canal.
Yeah.
A few years ago, someone said, Luke, don't get all grand and stuff. You're not the coastline runner, you're just a plogger. And I thought, hang on a minute, what's that? And I looked into it, and I realised that that's what I was doing.
Do you do it entirely on your own, or do you do it in groups?
I did. I originally started on my own. I got clapped off by a mayor in Great Yarmouth, but now more and more people join me, and I.
What I find interesting is that, I mean, jogging, you could say, is just something you do for yourself, for your body, but what you're doing is something extra. I mean, you're making a difference. Do you think you make much of a difference?
No. To be honest, I don't. I think I'm making a difference in raising awareness of not polluting our beaches so much.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's time now for the big story, and let me tell you, breaking tonight, a shock new poll shows that Robert Jenrick is powering ahead of Kemi Badenoch in the race for the Tory leadership. With more on this, I'm delighted to welcome the director of the Popular Conservatives, who are behind this latest polling, Mark Littlewood. Mark, what does the polling tell us?
It's fascinating, Mark. So just to be clear, we surveyed about 500 Conservative Party members. This is the third time we've done it. We go and check in with them about once a fortnight. And one of the questions we ask them, amongst many, is who at the moment is your preferred choice for party leader? And given the 5 left, now Priti Patel's been eliminated, Jenrick scored 38%, Kemi Badenoch scored 30%. There was a good chunk of don't knows still at 20%, and Tom Tugendhat, James Cleverly and Mel Stride were far behind. So let's assume, for the sake of argument, that the MPs whittle it down to those 2, because the party members that we're speaking to don't get a say until the MPs have whittled it down to 2. And let's assume that those 2 are Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch. Lots of assumptions here. We then said, were that to be the choice, how would you vote between those 2? And Jenrick wins that 58% to 42%. Huge caveats apply here. We haven't filtered this for age, gender, region or anything like that. Huge numbers of don't knows. And crucially, the party conference will take place while there are still 4 candidates in the race. And for folk as old as me might remember when David Cameron was a bit of a dark horse. Yeah. David Davis was nailed on to win, but Cameron's performance at party conference was so strong and David Davis is so weak, that changed the whole race.
John Major was a dark horse. Margaret Thatcher, no less, was something of a dark horse.
Well, it's often said in Conservative leadership races you don't want to be the favourite. I mean, at some point you want to be the favourite, but probably with 5 minutes to go. But Robert Jenrick seems to be ahead. I mean, this is what our poll says. The betting markets, if you rely on them, put Jenrick at now about a 50-50 chance of winning. The other really interesting thing was we asked the members, well, what are you interested about? What should the next leader do? And we gave them 20 options and said, pick any 5 that you're looking for. The sort of 20 things that you might expect the next leader of the party to be good at. Are you good on the media? Might you be able to get reform voters to come over? Might you have a good chance of winning the next election? That was one of the 20. Only 41% plumped for a good chance of winning the next election. By far the top was, I want a true blue Conservative. Right. So although the candidates are talking about unity, 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 when it actually comes to the grassroots vote, it's going to be purity, purity, purity that will win the final lap of the race.
And why does Jenrick look to be edging it at this stage, do you think?
Well, I think it's a mixture of things. On certain, if you like, touch issues like the European Convention of Human Rights, he's the candidate who's most unambiguous about leaving.
I mean, his political bank balance comes from the fact that he resigned as immigration minister over the government's failure to tackle the illegal migrant
That's exactly right.
And so he's going to be banking on that in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, he might well be, and that possibly is another advantage. I'm just inferring this, that because he didn't serve in the last government in the last days at a high level, perhaps he's seen as a slight breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
But who knows? Long way to go. I would say this. I think it's very likely that either Robert Jenrick or Kemi Badenoch will be the next leader of the party. Very likely it will be one of those two. But it's by no means certain that those two will be the head-to-head.
Well, that's the thing. And what do you make of this speculation around a dirty tricks campaign on the part of Camp Robert Jenrick? The idea that Kemi Badenoch's team are not happy that votes have been funneled to the centrist option of James Cleverly in order to knock Badenoch out of the race altogether.
You know what? If only Conservative MPs were this mathematically brilliant, they probably would have won the last general election. So if you look at the first round of voting, it's so tight between first and last. The idea that you can work out that we're going to put 2 votes there and an extra one here in order to influence exactly who comes bottom by 1 vote or 2 votes, it is a way more complex process than that. We don't know who will be eliminated tomorrow, on Tuesday. Then we know we're down to the last 4. But mainly speaking, I think most people are voting for the candidate they prefer. OK,
now stay with us, Mark. We have benched Annunziata because she works with you at the Popular Conservative. So let me ask you, another Popular Conservative back in the day, before you went full-time farmer in the parish. What do you make of this field? Because many would argue it's a sort of pretty weak offering, really, to the electorate, this 5.
I think there are good enough candidates there to lead the party. And I think I came to the conclusion a little while ago that it was between Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch, and so I'm not surprised. And I also agree that trying to fix a race, especially when you've only got 121 MPs, you know, last time we were voting on leadership, you know, you were talking about like 360 members of Parliament. So, you know, this is not only is it a tight race, but it's a very small race. And so 1 or 2 individuals will make all the difference. And so I think the idea of trying to fix it, that Kemi Badenoch does not get on the ballot paper, I think also the members, I think, will be very cross about that. I think they expect a fair fight and then let them decide at the end of the day. But they will go, the members will go for the most right wing of the candidates.
Michael, there's no obvious winner. Is that because the field is so weak?
Well, it's looking like Robert Jenrick is powering ahead, and that it is like to be one of these two. My own feeling is that none of these 5 will be the next Conservative Prime Minister. I think the problem is they're all tainted, as we've hinted at, by the fact that they all served in the last government. And Jenrick was in the cabinet for quite a while, one of these ministers, you know, who had a job for a year and moved on all the time. And I think the next Conservative leader will be somebody, maybe somebody who's only just been elected. The next Conservative Prime Minister will be somebody who's only just been elected at the election this summer, or even hasn't been elected yet, because I think it's going to take a long time for the Conservatives to overcome the reasons they lost this time, which were, frankly, the scandals and the incompetence of the Johnson and Truss years. And it needs a fresh face, or a completely new fresh. You take the last 3 people to topple a government and bring a new party into power, Tony Blair, David Cameron, Keir Starmer. None of those 3 had been government ministers.
Michael's right on the history there. I just wonder whether politics moves faster these days. And we might be in an era where it becomes commonplace for a party to either double its seats at a general election or lose 3/4 of them. Keir Starmer, when he became leader, was told, well, he'll never win because he's tainted by Jeremy Corbyn. Wins with a massive landslide. He was even under threat by Angela Rayner and others within his own party. So I'm not by any means saying it's nailed on that the Conservatives will win the next election. I just think voting patterns are much more febrile and unpredictable than ever before, and it's not impossible to actually win an election from a baseline of 121 seats.
Michael? I don't think any of these people have got the necessary stardust. Now, people change in office. Right. And, I mean, Starmer changed a bit in office, so, you know, you shouldn't write it off. But as for Robert Jenrick, I mean, MPs used to call him Robert Generic. You know, he was regarded as so...
You talk about stardust. I mean, what stardust has Keir Starmer got? Absolutely he's zero. He's the Prime Minister, isn't he? Minus 25. But seriously, I think that it's quite right. I think politics will change. I mean, the speed of which Labour have managed to annoy all the pensioners and goodness knows how many other people, and they've only been in power, you know, 5 minutes. And Keir Starmer seems to want to be, you know, unpopular. Well, he's going the right way about it. And I suggest he only got 35% of the vote. So, you know, be careful.
Michael will know this as a football fan like me. Michael's a Manchester United supporter. I'm a Southampton supporter. We know from years of following football, not politics, that even if your team is not very good, even if it's bad, you'll still win if the opposition is worse.
OK, very briefly, before you go, I mean, I'll throw my 2 pennies worth in. It's my impression that Jenrick's got the policy and Badenoch's got the personality. Does the ultimate winner fall between 2 stools?
Well, it's interesting. I also thought Priti Patel had the best plan for party reform. Right. So I think all 6 who ran are certain to be in the shadow cabinet in one way or another. So, and that's quite important at the end of the race, that all of them must still be on talking terms and better with each other. Otherwise, the Conservatives have a real problem.
Mark Littlewood, great to have you in the studio. In just a few minutes' time, we've got a top Tory MP, a former insider at the ERG, Mark Francois. He'll be revealing on this programme his pick for the next Tory leader. That is before 10 o'clock. But next up is Princess Catherine's anticipated return to public life this autumn. The good news that we've all been waiting for. I'll be asking Britain's best connected royal expert next.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. Low pressure has been in charge, bringing heavy rain and thunderstorms, some localised flooding. It does stay unsettled next week, but the winds turn to a northerly direction and it turns increasingly cold, particularly by the middle of the week. Low pressure at the moment, still giving outbreaks of heavy rain across southeast Scotland, northern England, down into Wales, parts of the Midlands as well. Thundery showers across the southeast. And as we head overnight, this all slowly pushes its way eastward. Still some heavy bursts of rain possible. Drier across Northern Ireland and Scotland with a few showers here. Under the clearest skies across Scotland, temperatures dipping into single figures. Elsewhere, under the cloud and rain, holding up around 12 to 14 Celsius. So much of England and Wales starting quite cloudy, outbreaks of rain, but clearer skies across Scotland. A few showers across the Highlands and Islands, but some bright spells elsewhere. Still some thicker cloud across the southeast with some patchy rain in places. Bright skies across Northern Ireland to start Monday morning, though rather cloudy across much of England. Those sunny spells starting to develop across Wales and the West Country first thing on Monday morning. And then through the day, the bright spells across the west just slowly start to push eastwards. It does mean, though, central eastern parts of England staying cloudiest for longest. The cloud thick enough for some outbreaks of rain at times. Sunny spells across northern England, Wales, the West Country, though starting to cloud over across Northern Ireland and Scotland, with rain arriving in the west later on in the day. Temperatures cooler for all, generally near average for the time of year, 16 to 18 Celsius, perhaps locally 20 towards the southeast. Turning more unsettled on Tuesday as a weather system pushes southeastward, some outbreaks of rain, showers following. The winds picking up, some strong and gusty winds across northern and western parts of the UK as well, and starting to feel colder. And that cold theme continues through the week ahead as well. Temperatures falling below average for the time of year. See you soon.
Good afternoon, Britain. Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK. From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister. Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained. I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there. Every weekday from midday. We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News. Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, a very big reaction to my big opinion monologue. This new government have thrown pensioners under the bus and they're going to pay a very high political price. That's my view. Your views are coming in thick and fast. Adrian has messaged us at gbnews.com/your say. Good evening, Adrian. How are you? Adrian says, Mark, there are also working people that will struggle this winter, who are working to survive, and as bills are going up, money is getting tighter. Do working people who get no help at all get any? Are they going to be cold this winter as well? Well, Adrian, you're absolutely right. The pensioners, 10 million pensioners, a good portion of whom are actually living in poverty, are going to suffer from this, but many hard-working Brits, as you say, are going to be affected, which is why we need energy independence. Why is Ed Miliband ditching or considering ditching our latest nuclear power station? Say it isn't so. We'll come back to that very shortly. Don't forget the papers at 10:30. But last night we were on air for a developing story in which, according to a Sunday Times exclusive, following months of cancer treatment, Princess Catherine, the Princess of Wales, is beginning to make plans for the future and hopes to gradually focus on work again. It's thought that she'll attend the Cenotaph in November and participate at a Christmas carol service, among other public duties. So is this the good news that the world has been waiting for? Let's get the views now of renowned royal author Angela Levin. Angela, very good to see you. The mood music around this story is very positive, but what are the facts?
The facts are she has been seriously ill, and I don't think that she will be able to do anything more than one or two things for the end of the year. I think the way it's been brought to us is that these are the key moments, but it means that she's not going back at all till the end of the year. Yeah. It's very hard for her. I mean, she has said that when she has a good day, she loves actually to do something with the school, so she'll take the children or bring them back. And that shows how important that is for her. But otherwise, I think it's not there yet. But it's very important that she is left calmly, that there's no stress on her, and that she can slowly get better and be treated and will be well. I mean, we hope she will be well sooner than later, but I think that she would be back full blast if she could. And just to say that, I think the public yearn for her, think so highly of her, that they're very upset if she's not actually around. So this makes us satisfied a little bit. We can actually think, you know, this is going to happen in 2 months, this will be in 3 months, oh, how lovely. But it's not going to be the same as her running around and laughing and smiling and running and enjoying things. One of the things she said was for the new man who's going to look after the scouts. And she loved that. And she's part of that. And she said to him, I hugely look forward to meeting you and doing it all. So that means there's some sort of thing about discussing lots of physical activities.
Now, you and I were on air earlier in the year for the debacle of the Mother's Day card, which was photoshopped. There was a lot of confusion. Several news agencies pulled the image. Do you think that, given the fact that this story, this exclusive in the Sunday Times, is bound to have come, you know, with the blessing of the palace, that this is an effort to manage the story and to keep the public informed?
Yes, I think that's exactly what I said, you know, that will help people wait with patience, because last time people got very angry and, you know, where is it, what's going on? We have learnt enough. I don't think we should actually creep in anymore. It's not our business to say exactly what have you got. But I think it is actually making sure that we know that she's there and will be getting better.
What will the news of Catherine's partial and gradual return to public duties mean for her husband, the Prince of Wales?
Well, it's well known now that he's working much harder than he ever has. He does a lot of work from home. He's actually doing a lot of work as well, and he's got a lot of stress.
Yeah.
He's heir to the throne. He's, trying to keep Harry away, and it's very, very difficult for him. He also feels very responsible, and this is very good, to actually look after the children and do the school run.
Because he's very much a modern father, isn't he?
He's not only a modern father, but I think he's got a whole different life because he didn't have a normal childhood. And he is very much, thanks to the Middletons and thanks to his wonderful wife, that he's learnt how to be a father and as well as being a husband. And I think that makes a huge difference. And you can see they adore him, they play with him, he's tumbling around in the grass and they're loving him. And he does adore them, and you can see they're very close to him. Well, he wasn't, because his parents were busy or upset or there was rows, so he's missed all that. So I think the reason he wants to do that is that bringing up his children is one of the key important things that he's doing. But if he does bring them up like that, when George becomes king eventually, hopefully, you have a marvellous man to run the country, and a superb number two behind him.
Well, I agree. I mean, I think the future of the monarchy looks absolutely set, given the future generations are there. I mean, obviously, William and Kate are box office, they're beloved, and the children are gorgeous.
Yes, but you have to keep Harry away, because one of Harry's passions and determinations is to take over part of the bringing up of the children. He said that because he thinks the second and the third he will, because the first one will be a king, and he wants to do the other two because he doesn't want them to be a spare. You see, and he said that...
You're suggesting that Harry will influence the upbringing of William's children?
Yes.
How can he possibly do that?
Well, he said that. He wants to do that. That's one of the reasons I think he wants to come over here, not permanently, but he wants to do that. William said absolutely not, under no circumstances. And he said he's going to keep trying because he thinks he will do very well.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons that William doesn't want him anywhere near him, certainly not to upset Catherine. I mean, it's a ludicrous thing to say, but he thinks he could have control over making them have a better living.
And a more sort of enhanced role rather than just being a spare like him.
Sort of his way of living. It's a shocking...
So are you according to your interpretation of the situation, you think that Harry is sort of unofficially banned from the palace by William? Is that your understanding?
I think William doesn't want to see him. I don't know about banned, but I think he doesn't want to
unwelcome.
See him. Unwelcome, because he doesn't want the stress.
Okay.
He's got enough to go on.
Okay.
And he doesn't want any more stress. Thank you very much.
Well, on that bombshell, Angela, let me finally ask you, a very sad anniversary today, 2 years since the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Your reflections of this remarkable lady 2 years on and her legacy?
Yes. Well, I've always thought she was wonderful. When I was a little girl, I always wanted to go and stand outside Buckingham Palace and hope that she would come out and have me in for tea. Absolute nonsense, but I used to want to go there. I was 5, 6. I just loved it. But I think that she showed us what doing something for others is, not actually trying to do things for ourselves. She showed us how we could be dutiful and honourable and help people. And I think she also had a very, very good sense of humour. So it was wonderful. And she said when she was 21, I've pledged my life to the service of my people. And she kept that forever until the end. I mean, what was also very, very touching was the Platinum Jubilee.
Yeah.
One of the last things she did, apart from Prime Ministers coming and going. And she was there, and she had this wonderful cartoon of her with a marmalade sandwich and Paddington Bear, which I thought was one of the best things of it all. It was marvellous. And also she tried, even though she had cancer of the bones, which was extremely painful. Prince Charles, then Prince, wanted her to come and be on the balcony, and she didn't want to. One, she was in pain, and two, she felt maybe the Jubilee wasn't going very well because there was a lot of the monarchy then. But she came green, she got dressed, and there were thousands of people there cheering her, and she nearly had a tear. You know, she was very strong and brave, and she didn't do that sort of thing. You know, she kept that to herself. But she came on the balcony and she saw how much people loved her, and I think that was a wonderful moment.
2 years on from her passing, and she's missed as much as ever. From Queen Elizabeth II to the Queen of Royal Reporting, Angela Levin. It's been brilliant to see you in the studio again. I'm back from my holidays, and we want to see lots of you this autumn on Mark Dolan tonight, so thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
There you go, my thanks to Angela Levin. Well, next up, my Mark Meets guest is renowned parliamentarian and one of the founding fathers of Brexit, Mark Francois. Is Brexit safe in Labour's hands? Plus, he'll be revealing his pick for the Tory leadership live on the show next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Would you have Harry back with open arms? And this is Ian. Hi, Ian. Harry is unfortunately not well. He's an emotional wreck. Ian, you actually took the words out of my mouth. I remember when I was younger, queuing up for hours for West Ham tickets. I'm that sad. But at least I got the ticket. It was my ticket. They knew it was me, and there were no touts involved. It's Forever says Harry can stay away. He was so quick to condemn this country as racist and to trash the Queen and royal family's reputations. He should be banished and his titles removed. He has not earned the right to call himself anything with a royal title. Ooh, passionate. Since moving to the US with Meghan, the American dream has had a number of issues for him, I think it's fair to say. But if Harry was to return, would he be welcome? And could he make it up with William? Look, if Oasis, sorry I said the O word, have done it, can William and Harry?
Well, I think it's going to present a lot of challenges. I mean, I've got to be clear here. When it comes to reconciliation, if it's possible, obviously, to mend the rift with William, clearly that is to be welcomed. But as for Harry returning, what precisely would that mean? What precisely would Harry want? Because if it is in any sense a return to royal duties, you really got to be very, very careful with what you're dealing with. As far as the royal family are concerned, for goodness sake, reconciliation, yes, but actual work as a senior working royal is not, in my opinion.
So I always think it's quite funny listening to serious people talk seriously about the royals, because it's not that serious, a lot of it. But actually, I think where I'm fascinated by them is that we can sort of see a bit of ourselves as a society and as individuals.
GB News, the People's Channel. I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Coming up in my Take at 10, you won't want to miss this. The chilling war on free speech continues. Find out why after 10, but first this. And it's time now for Mark Meets. Tonight, the renowned parliamentarian and one of the founding fathers of Brexit, the Right Honourable Mark Francois. Mark, lovely to see you in the studio.
Bless you. Good evening.
Are you enjoying this race for the Tory leadership?
Well, I've seen a few of them before.
Yes, you have. Well, actually, I think Rishi Sunak is your 8th leader, according to my calculations. You entered the House in 2001?
Correct.
So you've had about 8 leaders. Who should be the 9th?
I think it should be Robert Jenrick. And he did very well in the first ballot. And we're very encouraged because, as I think you've just had Mark Littlewood on,
correct,
the popular Conservatives, the popcons, have just done a poll of their panel, which includes a lot of Conservative voluntary party.
And it's a good sample. I think it's 500 members.
It's pretty good. And Robert's out ahead, 38%. Kemi Badenoch is second. She's on about 30. But significantly, Robert was just ahead of her in the last one last month. I think it was 0.2, 0.3%. So he's widened that lead from 0.2, 0.3 to an 8% lead. So there's a lot of momentum there, both, it would seem, among the voluntary party and obviously among members of Parliament. And as you'd have seen, the Shadow Health Secretary, Victoria Atkins, came out for Robert today. Now, that's quite significant because it shows very clearly that he's got support across the parliamentary party. So, you know, Victoria, people like John Lamont, very much on the sort of centrist to One Nation wing of the parliamentary party, and then you've got people like myself and Andrew Rosendale more at the other end of the spectrum. So I think what that shows is that Robert genuinely now has support right across the parliamentary party, so he'd be very well placed to unify it.
But given that Jenrick entered the House of Commons as a David Cameron acolyte, do you have an appetite for another Tory leader that's been on a journey?
Well, to some degree, all politicians are on a journey. It's inherent in the job. The job's changed in its nature since I first had the privilege of doing it 23 years ago. So we're all evolving all the time.
But from the left of the party, the One Nation Tories, the big society, to a hawk on immigration in just a few years?
Look, we've got to bring these different groups in the party together. If we're going to win in 2028-29, to some degree we've got to move on from those labels, and we've got to turn our fire on the Labour Party, who on Tuesday are about to do a wicked thing and take away the winter fuel payment from millions of pensioners. So that should be enough to rile the whole Tory party from left to right, and we're going to vote against it, and I imagine every Tory MP will vote against it, including Robert Jenrick. I really think Robert is the right person to unify us and take us forward.
Isn't it disingenuous of Conservative MPs to vote against this cut to the allowance on winter fuel payments, given that it's Labour that have inherited a Tory economic mess?
Oh, look, this £22 billion black hole.
Well, the country's broke, Mark. I mean, you don't have to be Carol Vorderman to work that out, do you?
2010, Liam Burns' letter, sorry, there's no money, right? So we were broke. There's no arguing about it. There is no such letter.
Well, we're running a deficit, aren't we?
£22 billion black hole. Laura Koonsberg, forgive me mentioning another outlet.
Please don't swear in the studio.
But this morning, very clear with Starmer, $9 billion of that is from inflation-busting pay increases that are paid to their paymasters in the trade union. So this £22 billion black hole line...
The Tories would have had to settle with the train drivers and the junior doctors eventually.
Not necessarily at that level. And my point is they're using that 22 billion figure as an excuse to do this to millions of pensioners. Didn't say in their manifesto they were going to do it. Kept accusing us of going to do it. We never did, empirically never did it. Now they're doing it and they're trying to use a completely false figure to blame us. And I think someone with Robert's forensic skills is the sort of person to help expose that.
Now, you mentioned Robert and his forensic skills. What about dirty tricks? Team Badenoch are a little surprised at how much support James Cleverly has received of late. There is speculation within the Badenoch camp that votes are being diverted to Cleverly to knock her off the ticket so that Jenrick doesn't face her in the final two.
Look, it's a lot of old tosh. As I said, I've seen lots of leadership contests before. Let me put it like this. When you've only got 121 voters, you can't afford to lend one vote to anybody. It's all tosh. What we need to do, what MPs should do, is vote for the person they think is the best. It's effectively a first-past-the-post election. Even when it gets to our voluntary party members, as it rightfully will, it's a first-past-the-post election. In these things, you don't muck about. You vote for the candidate who you think is the best.
Kemi Badenoch experienced socialism firsthand in Nigeria. She's the true conservative, isn't she?
Well, I'm not coming on here to do knocking copy for any other candidate.
You don't want blue on blue tonight.
We've had quite
friendly fire.
We've had quite a bit of that already, haven't we? Really,
just a bit.
But look, one of the reasons I voted for Robert, there were several, but one of them was that he was faced with a situation where he was asked to take legislation through the House of Commons that he had tried to toughen up, but which he knew in his heart of heart he thought wouldn't quite do the job. A lesser person might have tried to take that bill through anyway. He didn't. He resigned on a point of honour. Called me old-fashioned, but constitutionally, that is what he was supposed to do, and he did. You will know how rare that is in modern politics.
I've got no doubt that you admire all the candidates on the list.
Yeah.
And that if Kemi Badenoch wins, she'll enjoy your full support. Don't you think that a figure like Badenoch has a little more star power, a little more box office than Robert Jenrick, who's an intelligent man, a decent man, but he doesn't have that Boris Johnson Heineken effect, does he?
Well, to answer your question directly, that's not what the Popcon survey out tonight is saying, and that's not what my parliamentary colleagues said in the first ballot. I mean, those are real votes in real boxes, or one box in that case, and they seem to think that perhaps Robert had a little bit more star power than anyone else. We'll see what happens in the next round on Tuesday.
OK, brilliant. Well, look, we watch with interest how this pans out. Very briefly, a couple of seconds if you can. Brexit, is it safe under Labour?
No. Keir Starmer remains a Remainer. I sat in the Commons night after night, week after week, for the best part of 2.5 years and watched that man pull any stunt he could with others to try and keep us in the EU at almost any price. So I'm deeply suspicious of this talk about closer ties with the EU.
Won't he just fix the dodgy Tory deal that was negotiated by Boris Johnson? Won't he make Brexit work?
Brexit is working with the fourth largest exporter in the world. Mr. Second Referendum, Sir Keir Starmer, can't be trusted with Brexit.
Listen, thrilled to have you in the studio, Mark. Let's catch up soon. My thanks to the renowned and revered Conservative MP, the wonderful Mark Francois. In my Take at 10, the chilling war on free speech continues because the privileged elite don't want you to have a voice, whether it's attacks on GB News or others. Free speech is in crisis. See you in 2.
Warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. Low pressure has been in charge, bringing heavy rain and thunderstorms, some localised flooding. It does stay unsettled next week, but the winds turn to a northerly direction and it turns increasingly cold, particularly by the middle of the week. Low pressure at the moment, still giving outbreaks of heavy rain across southeast Scotland, northern England, down into Wales, parts of the Midlands as well. Thundery showers across the southeast. And as we head overnight, this all slowly pushes its way eastward. Still some heavy bursts of rain possible. Drier across Northern Ireland and Scotland with a few showers here. Under the clearest skies across Scotland, temperatures dipping into single figures. Elsewhere, under the cloud and rain, holding up around 12 to 14 Celsius. So much of England and Wales starting quite cloudy, outbreaks of rain, but clearer skies across Scotland. A few showers across the Highlands and Islands, but some bright spells elsewhere. Still some thicker cloud across the southeast with some patchy rain in places. Bright skies across Northern Ireland to start Monday morning, though rather cloudy across much of England. Those sunny spells starting to develop across Wales and the West Country first thing on Monday morning. And then through the day, the bright spells across the west just slowly start to push eastwards. It does mean, though, central eastern parts of England staying cloudiest for longest. The cloud thick enough for some outbreaks of rain at times. Sunny spells across northern England, Wales, the West Country, though starting to cloud over across Northern Ireland and Scotland, with rain arriving in the west later on in the day. Temperatures cooler for all, generally near average for the time of year, 16 to 18 Celsius, perhaps locally 20 towards the southeast. Turning more unsettled on Tuesday as a weather system pushes southeastward. Some outbreaks of rain, showers following. The winds picking up, some strong and gusty winds across northern and western parts of the UK as well, and starting to feel colder. And that cold theme continues through the week ahead as well. Temperatures falling below average for the time of year. See you soon.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Desning Cruck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online. In the United Kingdom and across the world, this is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10, the chilling war on free speech continues because the privileged elite don't want you to have a voice. Whether it's attacks on GB News or efforts to shut down platforms like X, the right to say what we think has never faced greater peril. Well, I'll be fighting back in my take at 10. Also tonight, will a failure to stop the small boats sink this new Labour government? I'll be asking former Government Minister Anne Widdecombe. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from tonight's top pundits, former MEP and Head of Communications at the popular Conservatives, Annunziata Rees-Mogg, journalist and broadcaster Michael Crick, and ex-Tory MP, and now farmer Neil Parish. Let me tell you, they won't be holding back tonight. Lots to get. So, lots to get through, but first, the news headlines and Tatiana Sanchez.
Mark, thank you very much and good evening. The top stories. Today it marks 2 years since the passing of Britain's longest reigning monarch, Queen Elizabeth II. She was on the throne for 70 years and was beloved by the nation and around the world. Earlier today, the King and Queen attended a church ceremony near Balmoral, where the late Queen was a regular worshipper. They were there for a Sunday service with prayer and remembrance of his late mother, who passed at the age of 96. In other news, the Prime Minister has hit out at the previous government this morning, saying the NHS has been broken in ways that he called unforgivable. These comments come as a Labour-commissioned review into how children are treated by the NHS is due to be published in the coming week. Health Secretary Wes Streeting set out Labour's plan to tackle the NHS crisis.
My reform agenda is about three big shifts out of hospital into the community. So we get the GP appointments that people need, the social care that people need, care closer to people's homes, better for patients, better value for taxpayers. It's a shift from analogue to digital, so we're not working with outdated systems and allowing the waste in the NHS to go unchallenged. And then thirdly, from sickness to prevention, making sure we're supporting people not just to live longer, but to live well for longer through good public health and prevention measures. Those are the pillars of Labour's reform agenda.
Meanwhile, Shadow Health Secretary Victoria Atkins told GB News that she's concerned that Labour are using this report to cover their plans to increase taxes.
What concerns me about the way that Labour is seeking to report this report is that they seem to be chasing headlines. Lord Darcy is a very respected, eminent surgeon. Of course, he is also, it's fair to say, a former Labour minister and a former Labour peer. But this report should be about what the state of the NHS is and providing solutions. And what worries me is that Labour is using this report as cover for the tax rises they plan to raise on us all at the budget in October.
And in sports, Great Britain finished runners-up at the Paris Olympic Games in the medals table, following a total haul of 124 medals. The figure, second only to China, comprised of 49 gold, 44 silver and 31 bronze, with GB securing titles in 18 of the 19 sports entered. Britain ended today with 2 more golds and 2 silver medals. His Majesty the King earlier sent his heartfelt congratulations to Paralympics GB and Commonwealth athletes for their numerous success at the Games. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. Now it's back to Mark Dolan.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks, Tatiana. Busy show to come. Will a failure to stop the boats sink this Labour government? I'll be asking former Government Minister Anne Widdecombe in just a few minutes. Plus, tomorrow's papers, some pretty remarkable headlines with full pundit reaction on Annunciata Rees-Mogg, Neil Parish and TV News legend Michael Crick. Lots to get through, but we start with my take at 10. Why would there be a campaign to shut down this place? Which, by the way, will be unsuccessful. Well, because the people who don't like GB News don't want you to have a voice. They want to stitch up the national conversation and bend the British people to their political will. But the assault on GB News, with a concerted effort to starve this channel of advertising funding, as well as endless bitching in the press, is part of a wider threat to free speech in this country and across the world. The privileged elites who dominate the media, politics and our public institutions, whose woke progressive ideas are supported by 10 to 15% of the population max, they hate social media for the same reason that they hate GB News, because it empowers the people. There are no gatekeepers on social media, no one withholding information, no editorialising, no censorship, no cancellation. The main argument for controlling social media is to stop the spread of misinformation. But who decides what that is? For example, it was misinformation to speculate during COVID that the virus had come from a lab leak. Now it's the most likely explanation, according to US government body, the CIA. Facebook chief Mark Zuckerberg has effectively apologised for allowing the US government under Joe Biden to censor his platform during the pandemic, when leading medics and scientists were silenced for criticising lockdowns, masks and vaccine tyranny. It's my view that they were right all along. We've got police officers here in the UK visiting people at home to quiz them about an unkind social media post, whilst burglaries and violent crime go unpunished. There are fears that at some point it could be illegal to misgender someone. That means you could go to jail for describing a man who thinks he's a woman as a man. So you would go to prison for saying something which is actually the case. Welcome to hell. History tells us that those who censor are never the good guys, which takes me to Brazil, where the Supreme Court, with the full support of the country's socialist government, have banned free speech social media platform X altogether, potentially due to misinformation concerns. Or is it down to ex-owner Elon Musk's refusal to cancel the accounts of those who are critical of the Brazilian government. Even former Prime Minister Tony Blair wants to see measures to control social media. He's worried about the lies being spread online, even though he and Alistair Campbell were the kings of misinformation during the Iraq War. Make it make sense. There is now a concerted effort to silence and shut down debate, particularly around pressing issues which affect ordinary people. Mass migration, net zero, which has become a religious cult that can't be challenged, that can't be criticised, the anti-science madness of trans ideology and the absurd demonisation of the West. None of these things stand up to any real scrutiny. But it is the scrutiny that the Negroni-quaffing North London Liberal elite want to end. For example, BBC lifer Jonathan Dimbleby became a figure of ridicule this week with the following tweet. Here's what he tweeted. "I post infrequently," he says, "and this is my last. Elon Musk's toy has been colonised by narcissists, the brain dead and advertisements. I shall nonetheless miss the wit and wisdom of the best among whom I have friends. The latter I shall still see. To the rest, goodbye. Life is too short." What a plonker. First of all, he calls other people narcissists. But he's the one declaring to the world that he won't be sending any tweets anymore. That's a bit narcissistic in itself, isn't it? It's not an airport lounge. You don't have to announce your departure. This apparently legendary broadcaster rails against narcissists after using this platform over the last couple of months to retweet praise about his own book. How about this? "Thanks to the wonderful Dominic Sandbrook for such a brilliant review for my latest book, Endgame 1944. Well, it's the end game for these out-of-touch numpty dinosaurs from another era. Former stars of an establishment media which is dying by the day. Why? Because it's no longer trusted. Look at the BBC, all over the papers today, standing accused of bias against Israel in their reporting of the war in Gaza on 1,500 occasions. What would BBC Verify, their creepy disinformation watchdog, have to say about that, I wonder? Here's what I think. People don't need to be protected from information or misinformation. We've all got a brain. We've got common sense. Allow the public to have access to everything and make their own mind up. The pandemic, if I'm honest, was a watershed for me, when enormous amounts of unscientific nonsense was spouted by the government and senior medics to sell, in my view, failed policies which have left us with a deeply damaged and diminished country. So forgive me for not blindly trusting the ruling elite and their messages. Forgive me for having questions or objecting to tyranny, like I did when I chopped up a mask on talk radio in 2021. Aged pretty well, that one. Free speech is just that. It is free. And if we allow the privileged elite to take it away from us, we will pay a very high price. Your reaction, gbnews.com/your say. Look, it's all about opinions. Government experts, ministers, top scientists would argue that masking, vaccines and lockdowns saved countless lives. That's not my view, but that could be the view of many. Let me know your thoughts. But first, my top pundits this evening. We have former MEP Annunziata Rees-Mogg, journalist and broadcaster Michael Crick, and former Conservative MP and now farmer Neil Parish. Neil, let me start with you. Are you worried about the state of free speech in this country?
Yeah, I think we need to protect it, and I think you need to be able to debate everything, whether it's on the right or whether it's on the left. I mean, a lot of these sort of further right parties in Europe have come about because the fact that all their parties and all their governments are very sort of politically correct and very middle ground. We've got to debate it properly. GB News, I mean, we're here tonight on GB News, so we're bound to say it's a great channel, but seriously, it does debate everything. It debates it properly. and if you've got right-wing views and you want to expound them, do so. And I think this is the problem now. Is it about, protecting people, or is it about actually not giving them the facts? And I think that is the problem. And I think, who is it that's going to censor it all? And that's where it's very, very dangerous. Now, I know sometimes social media can be terribly offensive, and I think that needs to be taken down. But to be able to debate the political position on either side, right or left, on the Israeli side or on the Palestinian side, let's be able to do it, and let's be honest with ourselves. And I think all the time we are being censored. Lots of stuff's been taken out of our books and all sorts of things. My wife's a teacher, but she gets terribly worked up about how all our books are being censored, or what our children have now is completely different to what we grew up with, and everything is changing. But who is deciding this? This is the problem. Okay. And in a democracy, we should be able to debate right, left, centre, whatever we want to debate.
Well, Michael Crick, is there a different way of looking at this? Are concerns about free speech just a right-wing conspiracy?
No, I regard myself as sort of a little bit on the centrist to the left. And I'm very concerned about free speech and upholding it and freedom of expression. And my view is that we should think, if we're going to regulate social media more than it is regulated now, we have to think very carefully indeed that we don't go too far. I mean, for instance, if you're going to regulate because and say you cannot put out misinformation, as you said in your monologue, Mark, who is to decide what is misinformation? There are plenty of laws that apply to the media already in terms of inciting racial hatred, inciting violence, that kind of thing. And the same laws can be applied to social media. Now, there probably are gaps that need filling there, but I just think we have to think, not rush into this. We have to think very carefully indeed. And, of course, the real problem is that social media is not, confined. It's not like a newspaper which is published in one country or a television station that is broadcast from one country. It's much more multinational, so it's harder to regulate in a way. But my overall view is be very cautious, and that freedom of expression, freedom of speech is something that we have developed as civilization, but well, in the West, the liberal West certainly, over the years, and we should constantly be on our guard to preserve it.
Although, Annunciata, critics might argue that platforms like GBNews or X, for example, or Facebook, that they lend a voice to people who are divisive or even dangerous, bad for democracy, extremists, liars and cranks.
I actually think that's very healthy. That if you don't have the ability to argue back against extremists, against misinformation, then people start to believe it. And the more you sweep it under the carpet, the more it gets a following that cannot be debated, because only those who've already sort of started to believe in it are even hearing it in the first place, because it's hidden from public view. With light and air, we can all, in our own ways, challenge the falsehoods that do come about in any exchange, in any platform. And we've seen falsehoods in mainstream media. Just because there are rules in place does not mean that things don't slip through. But we can argue against them. We can point out where things are factually incorrect or morally wrong, and we can argue against that. And I think that is why true freedom of speech is so important. We already have laws protecting against inciting violence, causing damage, all of those things. We do not need to restrict it further, and in fact it's worth dying in a ditch for, to protect it for all our futures.
OK, I think you'll agree, a very high-calibre panel tonight. They're coming in hot, and they return at 10:30 for tomorrow's papers. I'll be asking, after 10:30, I'll ask Michael Crick what he thinks about that ridiculous tweet from Jonathan Dimbleby. So self-important, in my view. But next up, will a failure to stop the boats sink this new Labour government? I'll be asking Anne Widdecombe next.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News. the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are non-crime hate incidents a breach of your human rights?
It's crazy, isn't it? Freedom of speech is now on life support here, and we've had, in the last week alone, we've had Elon Musk being threatened. He's now out of Brazil with X. We've had the founder of Telegram basically being arrested, and he's been charged in France. We're not quite sure the circumstances why he was there, whether Macron invited him to the Olympics or whatever, but he's been arrested under several charges. And we've had all sorts of people who've been speaking out are basically being shut down. So it has to be freedom of thought. It has to be freedom of expression. It's one of our fundamental rights under the Human Rights Act of 1998. Article 10 gives you the right to express your opinion and also to air that publicly.
It's basically I say something that somebody doesn't like, so probably one of my monologues. Then somebody can then inform the police that I've upset them in some way. And then that goes on my record, so I now have a criminal record. Because somebody else who I've never met, who's never met me, has heard something that upset or hurt your feelings. Then if I go for a certain job or I go for my DBS check, which I do regularly because I go and talk in schools, somebody could pull that up and go, well, you did something that had hurty feelings, and so now you can't have that job. That has got to be a breach of my human rights.
Oh, it's absolutely. Article 10, it's a fundamental right to protect your freedom of speech and so on and so forth. And this is what's really worrying, because it's happening around the world, as I say, in Brazil, in France, in various other countries. In America, you know, Zuckerberg, he came out in the last few days and said the pressure that he was put under by the Biden administration, first of all about COVID, and even jokes he was told to suppress them. The other thing that he was saying about the Hunter Biden laptop. And he said he couldn't speak about that because they were telling him not to. And what he did, he had to fact check, and he turned around and said he regretted that, because the reality is you're working on that sort of basis.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Well, the messages are coming in thick and fast. gbnews.com/your say. Alan, who is a GB News member. Good evening, Alan. How are you? He says this Labour government will bring us down and will become a laughingstock around the world. Perhaps we already have, says Alan. Of course, Labour would argue they've inherited a mess from the Tories. But here is a question for you. Could a failure to stop the boats sink this new Labour government? 8,000 people have illegally crossed the Channel and entered the UK since Sir Keir Starmer entered office, and today it's been revealed that Home Secretary Yvette Cooper is considering tearing up a very expensively financed agreement with France over a plan to tackle the small boats crisis. Meanwhile, there's growing speculation that the Germans are considering processing asylum applications in Rwanda following this new government's axing of the policy. So what could be the political implications of Labour's failure to stop the boats? Let's get the views of former Home Office Minister and Reform UK spokesperson Anne Widdecombe. First of all, Anne, it's good to see you again. Is the Home Secretary right to look again at this deal with the French?
Oh, absolutely. And should be torn up, and we should just save money. The fact is that the French have not delivered anything for the millions that we've given them, and they have no will to do so. And I can't see that with Barnier as Prime Minister, they're suddenly going to develop a will to help Britain. So, I think it was always a nonsense. It's almost as big a nonsense as Labour saying they're going to stop the gangs. They might as well promise to stop the entire mafia. You know, if you stop one gang, another one comes along and takes its place. So they're talking nonsense. And what I was never able to understand is how they went through an entire general election with effectively no plan to stop the boats, no plan to deal with migrants getting off the boat. They actually went through the whole general election like that. And now, of course, we can all see no plan.
And now, Anne, the Labour can't do a worse job than the Conservatives did in regard to these illegal crossings. And Sir Keir Starmer is very focused on improving Britain's relationship with the EU. Won't that help us to stop the boats? A bit of collaboration.
No, it won't help us at all. As I say, we've already spent millions on trying to persuade the French to help us. We know that they stand there and watch the boats go out. We know they don't do anything about it. If you contrast that with the agreement that Spain has got with Morocco, for example, where there really is genuine joint activity, which has worked. If you look at that and then you look at the absence of will in France, no. The fact that Keir Starmer wants to cozy up to the EU is not going to help us. The EU doesn't want to help us.
And how embarrassing would it be for the government if Germany or another EU nation were to adopt a Rwanda-style plan?
Well, it would be extremely embarrassing because they dropped the only deterrent that the Conservatives had on offer. Now, you can argue that it was a very weak plan and that it never actually came to fruition, but it was some sort of a deterrent. They dropped that completely. And so if Germany now moves in, Germany, don't forget, is also signed up to the European Court of Human Rights. It's also signed up to it. Now, if it can move migrants to Rwanda while being part of the ECHR, sorry, why was it that we found it so impossible? Somebody explain that to me.
And what will be the political consequences for this Labour government if they fail to stop the boats between now and the next election?
Oh, I have no doubt whatever that they'll lose. But for heaven's sake, just think what that means for the country. We've got 5 years before they need to go to the country. 5 years in which we could simply have boats coming in day after day, as they are at the moment. 9,000 migrants since this government took power have come unchecked, just come and arrive, and now have to be put into hotels. They have to be looked after, costing us millions, amounting eventually to billions, and that will go on for 5 long years, with arrivals amounting to the size of a city every year. Every year it will go on. And so I take no solace in thinking, well, they'll lose next time. Something has to be done soon.
Of course, Anne, just a few days ago, 12 people tragically died in the Channel. We use the word migrant. These are human beings. Is there a humanitarian case for legal and safe routes across the Channel?
Oh, legal and safe routes are a nonsense. They're already in a safe country. They're in France. You try getting a legal and safe route if you're a genuine asylum seeker. Say you're an interpreter who was left behind in Afghanistan, terrified of the Taliban. No such thing as a legal and safe route because you can't put your head above the parapets and apply. Those who actually do need our help are the least likely to get it if you set up safe routes. And all that will be doing is, offering to sort out France's problem because, as I say, they're already there. They're in a safe country. And of course, it's hang on, let me finish this.
Go on.
Of course, it's a tragedy that people die, but the way to stop them dying is to deter them from setting out on that enterprise in the first place.
Well, indeed, Anne, sorry to interrupt you, but that takes me to my next question. What is Reform UK's answer to the problem?
Well, the first one is that we will turn the boats around. Before you say that can't be done, Australia did it, Belgium did it, it can be done.
You can't do that with these dinghies and improvised vessels, though, can you, Anne?
Yes,
because if the vessel were to sink, you could be sued for manslaughter.
If the vessel were to sink, but you are there beside it, and you can tow it back. That can be done. Now, secondly, some will still get through, and we've never, ever denied that. Therefore, unlike the other parties, we have a plan B. And plan B is that if anybody does get here, we say you are automatically refused because you're an illegal migrant. And before we deport you, meanwhile, we're not going to put you in a hotel. We're going to put you into a secure reception centre. Now, that is what we need to do with all new asylum seekers. That's a deterrent. And then whether you send them from that reception centre back to France, back to their home country, or to Rwanda, it's a deterrent.
Of course, many would argue that the Reform UK solution won't wash with human rights lawyers. But Anne, fascinating conversation. I missed you in August and look forward to our weekly encounters in the run-up to Christmas. My thanks to a very good friend of mine, formidable former government minister Anne Widdecombe. Next up, tomorrow's papers with some cracking front pages and a top panel. See you in 2.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. Low pressure has been in charge, bringing heavy rain and thunderstorms, some localised flooding. It does stay unsettled next week, but the winds turn to a northerly direction and it turns increasingly cold, particularly by the middle of the week. Low pressure at the moment, still giving outbreaks of heavy rain across southeast Scotland, northern England, down into Wales, parts of the Midlands as well. Thundery showers across the southeast. And as we head overnight, this all slowly pushes its way eastward. Still some heavy bursts of rain possible. Drier across Northern Ireland and Scotland with a few showers here. Under the clearest skies across Scotland, temperatures dipping into single figures. Elsewhere, under the cloud and rain, holding up around 12 to 14 Celsius. So much of England and Wales starting quite cloudy, outbreaks of rain, but clearer skies across Scotland. A few showers across the Highlands and Islands, but some bright spells elsewhere. Still some thicker cloud across the southeast with some patchy rain in places. Bright skies across Northern Ireland to start Monday morning, though rather cloudy across much of England. Those sunny spells starting to develop across Wales and the West Country first thing on Monday morning. And then through the day, the bright spells across the west just slowly start to push eastwards. It does mean, though, central eastern parts of England staying cloudiest for longest. The cloud thick enough for some outbreaks of rain at times. Sunny spells across northern England, Wales, the West Country, though starting to cloud over across Northern Ireland and Scotland, with rain arriving in the west later on in the day. Temperatures cooler for all, generally near average for the time of year, 16 to 18 Celsius, perhaps locally 20 towards the southeast. Turning more unsettled on Tuesday as a weather system pushes southeastward, some outbreaks of rain, showers following. The winds picking up, some strong and gusty winds across northern and western parts of the UK as well, and starting to feel colder. And that cold theme continues through the week ahead as well. Temperatures falling below average for the time of year. See you soon.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. No, he didn't say that, though. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 10:30, so it's time for tomorrow's front pages. But wait, don't do it just yet, because let me tell you that we've got an amazing team here at GB News. Look, I've got my fabulous pundits. We've got Michael, Annunziata and Neil. I've got my amazing producers, Mariana and James. I could just spend the rest of the show going through the team. But what about the directors? They don't get much of a big up. Do you know what I mean? Harry, Alistair, right, I just, obviously, again, I won't name all of them and offend people, but there's somebody very special that's moving on today, and it is Josh. Director Josh, he is going back to Australia. He's a handsome Australian man, and he is going to go for the sunshine, the quality of life and the barbecues. But let me tell you that he's a brilliant director. He's excellent in an emergency. He's very talented, he's a lovely guy, and we will miss you hugely. So, Josh, thank you for the many hundreds of hours of excellent telly that you've put out, and do stay in touch. OK, folks, it's time for tomorrow's papers. And we start with the Daily Telegraph in tomorrow's front pages. NHS in decline for the first time in 50 years. NHS progress is going backwards for the first time in 50 years, a major report commissioned by the government has found. This is a report by Lord Ara Darzi, the surgeon and former health minister, who this week will highlight failures in the most basic care offered by the health service. It will criticise the amount of time that children are left waiting in A&E and how the NHS's routine services ground to a halt during the pandemic. Poll shock signals the end of Kamala Harris's honeymoon. That, of course, in the race for the White House. And Wes Streeting not remotely happy over winter fuel cuts. The Health Secretary has said he's not remotely happy with the plan to remove the winter fuel payment from millions of pensioners. Wes Streeting spoke up as up to 40 Labour backbenchers prepared to defy Sir Keir Starmer by abstaining in Tuesday's vote on whether the cut should go ahead. OK, let's go to the Daily Mail now, and let's have a look at this. Labour said cutting OAP winter fuel cash could kill 4,000. That's what the party's research claimed when Starmer was in the shadow cabinet. So why is he forcing it through now? Oh, and a little headline about that handsome devil, Eamon Holmes. I mean, am I going to get in trouble, Annunciata, for reading out this headline? Eamon takes new girlfriend on a Spanish cruise. Well, listen, I was supposed to be on that cruise, but he texted me last minute and said, I've got someone better. Very jealous. Anyway, Eamon, have a lovely holiday.
I don't believe you, Mark.
I was hoping to be his mate. I was very interested in the all-inclusive
I think
buffet.
it was the girl that said that.
That's right, yeah.
Probably right. It's an upgrade to get Eamon. Eamon, have a lovely holiday, and we'll see you when you're back. Daily Express now. Axing of winter fuel payments was cruel and a planned betrayal. The Labour Party clearly planned to betray pensioners before the election. The veteran Tory MP said last night. That's Andrew Rossendale, who described the decision as cruel. Is that disingenuous from a backbencher of a party that created this mess in the first place? I'll be asking my pundits in a moment. Metro. Official inquiry begins into thousands of deaths. Day of truth over mental health cull. Devastated parents hope that they'll finally find out why thousands of their children died whilst receiving care from failing mental health facilities over more than 2 decades. The Lampard inquiry will begin to investigate the deaths of around 2,000 people who were either inpatients at NHS-funded independent clinics in Essex or who died within 3 months of leaving between 2000 and 2023. It looks to be a devastating story, that one. And last but not least for now, The Guardian. Scores of MPs could refuse to back Starmer over cut in fuel payments. Corruption red flag on £15 billion COVID contracts, and failures at Lucy Letby Hospital revealed. And how about this magnificent photograph of the Stade de France in Paris? Farewell Paris Paralympics finale brings games to a close. And the Paralympics were a fabulous spectacle this year. So much accomplishment, so many heroic stories. And those are your front pages. Let's get reaction now from tonight's top pundits. I'm delighted to welcome political broadcaster and former MEP Annunciata Rees-Mogg, TV news legend, no less, Michael Crick, and ex-Tory MP and now farmer Neil Parish. And folks, there's only one story in town, and that is the growing civil war within the Labour Party over winter fuel payments. Michael, we can agree this is an economic mess of the Conservatives' making, but it's now Keir Starmer's problem, and it's becoming a political one.
It is becoming a political one as the party heads to its party conference starting in, less than 2 weeks' time in Liverpool. And it's looking like, Liverpool was meant to be, for the Labour Party, a big party to celebrate an extraordinary election victory. And it looks like being dominated by this issue. And, of course, the problem politically is that this is Rachel Reeves's first fight as Chancellor. And you can't really give way in your first fight. You've got to win your first fight, your first few fights. Yeah. And that's the difficulty. And now you've got her, Wes Streeting, as you quoted earlier, saying, I'm not remotely happy about having to say to some of my constituents, quote, I'm sorry that I'm going to go into work this week to vote for something that will take money away from you. I mean, Streeting he's saying that nonetheless it's necessary. Of course, Streeting has only got a majority of about 500. He very nearly lost his seat at the election.
Yeah, he did.
And of course, if when the next leadership election happens in the Labour Party, he will be a contender and probably the leading contender. So he's got something he can quote from way back in 2024.
Is he having his cake and eating it?
I think there is an element of that. Yeah. As for this idea, there's going to be this...
Politicians would never do that. Have their cake and eat it. How could you suggest such a thing?
As for this idea, it's going to be a huge rebellion. Well, you might get a fair number abstaining, but the number of people who will actually vote against it in the Labour ranks, particularly amongst the new MPs, they're all terrified after the 7 left-wingers were suspended for opposing the two-child benefit cap. That everybody's terrified they'll be thrown out of the party and you know, not allowed to stand again and all that.
Annunziata.
Absolutely. I mean, the Guardian says 50 Labour MPs are expected not to support, and the Telegraph says 40 will abstain. So you're only looking at 10 who are really going against the party. These are not big numbers. The majority is massive. It's very slim in terms of the number of votes that they won by, and West Streeting is a great example of quite what a knife edge some of their constituencies are on. But in terms of parliamentary maths, this is not a worry.
Isn't there something Thatcherite about this policy, though? It's the idea of some painful medicine early in the administration in order to heal the economy. I mean, Margaret Thatcher inherited inflation. There were a lot of challenges there. She wasn't able to bring taxes down for several years when she became Prime Minister. Isn't Reeves cut from the same cloth here? Isn't she Labour's Iron Lady?
Well, it's much easier to argue that if you're not giving enormous pay increases with one hand to a level of working population and taking away from pensioners, which is unconscionable, surely, to most people as who needs it the most.
OK.
I mean, this is just so inept because it's not really going to save much money. You are
4 billion.
Yeah, but you're also going to have to pay it to a lot of other pensioners that are not going to get it because Rachel Reeves is going to have to get this back somehow politically. There are lots of things will be done. And then, you see, in politics, you know, and then you've got the NHS and then you've got more elderly people that will need treatment because they are cold. Let's be blunt about it. So the whole thing is just a complete mess because they didn't need to target this and so they chose politically to do it, and it is really unravelling very fast. And of course they may have a massive majority in Parliament, but you've got to remember only 35% of the population voted them in, and I reckon now they would probably have difficulty in getting 30% of the population. And you know, and so you see.
Are you suggesting that Labour would lose an election if it was held tomorrow?
It'd be hung Parliament if you had an election tomorrow.
It was actually 33.7%, I think.
One total. So not much over a third. Then.
Labour got fewer votes. Then they got 9.5 million. They got fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn did in 2019. And the actual number of votes.
It was because the Conservative vote was completely halved by reform, basically, and so therefore they've got this massive majority. Now, I like first past the post, but my God, you have got a Parliament that is totally unrepresentative of the popular vote. There is no doubt about it.
One of the huge problems with this is that we're expecting fuel prices, energy prices to go up this winter. And that is caused to a great extent by the very policies that Labour are pushing forward, all the greening of our energy. And if they are exacerbating the problem and taking away the amelioration for it, surely that has
That's right, they've allowed the cap to rise, you see, all of these
choices, and they've made the wrong one.
Aren't they playing the long game with green energy to make Britain energy efficient and get bills down in the long run?
Even they have stopped claiming it will cut bills.
By £300.
By £300, the exact same as pensioners will be losing. But if you look at the latest round when they had their auction just last week, the prices they're paying per gigawatt are absolutely eye-watering.
If we don't do our bit to get a grip on global warming, the costs that we have to pay as a society in all sorts of ways.
We're already doing more than any other country.
Well,
and
we're setting a good example.
Global emissions. No one is copying us because no one is stupid enough to bankrupt.
And if we go back on our commitments, the rest of the world say, oh, well, we might as well weaken our commitments too.
They haven't done anything anyway.
And the costs of things like, you know, appalling weather, the migration will be massively bigger than it is right now because vast parts of the world will be uninhabitable.
Go on, finish your point.
Well, I'd have it.
So your argument is the cost will be far greater
in the long term.
But the problem is with Michael's argument is that while the rest of the world might follow, places like China and India aren't going to, and therefore they will be the ones who will pollute, and they are having their industrial revolution, and we're seen as colonialists if we say they can't do it. and it's fascinating. And so why are we 1%, 1.25%, aren't we, in global warming?
But that is not, morally, that's not an argument to say we won't bother.
No, all right.
Neil,
yes.
You're a farmer. You're experiencing climate change. So why aren't you behind the green agenda?
Well, I'm behind some of the green agenda, but not just force everything through. And of course, the costs. We don't sort of look at the cost of what some of this is financially. And if we want growth, we have to do both.
James,
some greening,
James,
but also
do you mind if we do the Queen after the break? OK.
Because one of the things we should be doing is not eating as much meat, and then you'll be out of business.
Exactly. We'd eat more meat. That's what we need to do.
We should look at dietary advice. Lots more pure meat and less of this.
Yes, quite right, Annunciata. Yes,
OK,
well done.
Annunciata, just on the politics of this, I mean, it's a headache for Keir Starmer, but there's a pattern emerging from this new leadership and this new government, which is standing their ground. The two-child benefit cap. OK, this is a policy which goes against Labour's philosophy, but they argue it's for the economy, it's the correct thing to do, it's prudent. Similarly, cut your cloth regarding these winter fuel allowances. This is a disciplined and consistent Labour government, isn't it?
No. They say what they think they need to at that time. What he has done is learn that flip-flopping, he was known as Flip-Flop Keir before the election, didn't win him any popularity, so he's sticking to his guns now.
Don't you think he's showing courage?
I think that's sensible in terms of character, but he's picking the wrong battles.
Yeah, it's absolutely the wrong battle to have courage on this one.
To be fair, I think...
madness.
Michael Crick, last word.
To be fair, I think that Labour will plan to get rid of both of these policies by the end of the Parliament, but they just don't feel they can do it now.
OK, listen, coming up, more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages, plus a couple of very explosive stories. Has Sir Elton John just backed Donald Trump in the race for the White House? And the most offensive chants about the late, great Queen Elizabeth II. A shocking story, plus more front pages. Don't go anywhere.
Nana are Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
So Prince Harry, apparently, Operation Bring Harry In from the Cold. Do you feel there's any truth to this?
I mean, lots of tongues are wagging, Nana. I mean, you know, we heard that he was at the memorial for Lord Robert Fellows, and obviously William was there as well. And so there was lots of, you know, everyone going into overdrive. That was in Stattisham, Norfolk the other day. He wasn't going to attend, said the People, a mouthpiece of his. And I would have actually thought that maybe a lookalike had turned up. But now we have been led to believe that Harry's been talking to people from friends from his old life. And it's not that he wants to make a permanent move to the UK, so I believe. What I've heard, it's more about his reputation.
Well, he wants to have his cake and eat it, by the sounds of it. I mean, obviously, no good cake it remains uneaten.
We know that the royal family is his currency. I mean, even his late mother, you know, obviously he's almost usurped her memory, and he needs this. He needs this to make money. Of course, he raced in for Lord Robert Fellows' memorial service. So there's lots of ambiguous behaviour, and he is going to be, you know, in New York. We call it the silly season, don't we? And we're also looking. There's lots of different stories that are coming out, but he needs to tell stuff. He's going to be in New York, and it's. You know, we've got to remember the enormous amount of hurt and offence. I mean, Prince William absolutely reeling. Poor Princess Catherine. You know, Spare book coming out at the most awful time, and you've got the Netflix
series.
You know, it's absolutely, this is a rehabilitation strategy.
GBNews, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Pundits talking, let me tell you, well, that's why we have them here. Let's have a look at more front pages, and we have the I newspaper with the following. Ministers consider plan for cheaper energy bills as Starmer faces winter fuel anger. Households on lower incomes would receive cheaper gas and electricity bills under plans being weighed up by officials ahead of the October budget. A social tariff for energy bills, similar to those for mobile phones, is being considered to help ease the cost of living crisis as criticism mounts over the proposed cut to winter fuel payments. Times newspaper, crime agency tasked with tackling gangs on its knees. The law enforcement agency at the forefront of Keir Starmer's plan to smash the gangs is in crisis, losing more officers than it recruits and suffering an unprecedented brain drain. Now, that certainly doesn't bode well for Sir Keir Starmer's efforts to smash the gangs. Starmer to give winter fuel rebels short shrift. Bullish PM faces bid by peers to block benefit cuts. And send in the clowns to help children heal more quickly. Laughter really is the best medicine. Researchers have found that children seriously ill in hospital with pneumonia made a faster recovery after a visit from specially trained medical clowns. It's a lovely thought there and a lovely story. Daily Mirror. Letby inquiry exclusive, the deadly link. The Lucy Letby inquiry will look into whether the NHS failed to learn from the crimes of sick serial killers Beverly Allett and Harold Shipman. Daily Star. There goes summer. Floods give way to an autumn freeze. Brrr is the headline. Brace yourselves, Britain. The hellish rain we've been having is going to get even worse. Then it'll get really cold. Oh, goody is the headline. There you go. Thank you very much for all of those front pages. Reacting to those stories, Annunciata Rees-Mogg, Michael Crick and Neil Parish. Now, alongside manager Lee Carsley's refusal to sing the English national anthem at yesterday's Republic of Ireland versus England football match, which was the topic of my Big Opinion monologue, there was further controversy before the game even kicked off. Just hours before the 2-year anniversary of the late Queen Elizabeth II's death, Irish fans taunted their English opponents with the sickening chant of Lizzie's in a box. Now, we have the footage of these disgusting chants, but in the name of taste and decency, I just couldn't bring myself to air it. They've got their free speech, fine. It's not a hate crime, but it's just really, really in poor taste. And let's get reaction from my pundit on this one. Michael Crick, you're a big football supporter yourself. I don't believe in sort of rounding these people up and arresting them, but it's pretty unpleasant stuff, isn't it?
It is, and it just shows that we're not the only country to have some nasty, a large number of nasty yobs.
Yeah.
And of course, we saw that in Ireland a few months ago with those appalling protests in the centre of Dublin. What can one say? Football attracts people. At least the game attracts a lot fewer of them than it used to, actually. And I go to football match. I go to 50, 60, 70 games a year, and it's very rare that actually you come across something as nasty as that.
Yeah, I mean, have you had any of those derby games at Old Trafford, whether it's sort of Liverpool or Leeds United? Have you heard or encountered anything that you were offended by?
Yeah, I mean, for instance, there are regularly taunts by other fans from other clubs about the Munich air crash in 1958, and United fans taunt Liverpool fans about Hillsborough. All appalling stuff, and one side goes the other.
But you can't jail these people.
But you see, I think when our manager won't actually sing our national anthem, I'm not saying this incited the Republic of Ireland's fans to sort of say Liz is in a box, but it doesn't help. And I think we really have not really got to sort of face up to this, and especially when we got a monarchy, present monarchy, who's really worked hard over the situation in Ireland. It is offensive, but I just don't. I'm sorry, I just did not agree with our manager not singing the national anthem, and this idea that you can't concentrate because you've got to sing an anthem. I mean, is he an Irish Republican? Let's be blunt about it. You know, it's all very interesting. I think.
You can't legislate for taste, and I couldn't have just sat here and said what I did about free speech if I thought you even should try. However, there is no doubt this is completely tasteless, particularly on the day before her 2-year anniversary, that she was still a mother, grandmother, and much loved by millions across
the world.
It is deeply offensive, but I'm afraid that's life, and they are tasteless idiots who I hope lost the game.
And I think when you trouble is a football match too, isn't it? You know, when people start to chant, then everybody joins in, and I think that's the other problem.
You're right, and I think actually, as journalists, we should not make too much of this because it only encourages them.
To do more.
You know, good point.
Exactly.
Well, let's go
I would agree with
one
that.
very sad royal story to a more positive one, because the Mirror are reporting this evening that King Charles has made a special vow on the anniversary of the passing of his mother, Queen Elizabeth. The paper reports he's determined to return to his duties with renewed vigour as he enters the second chapter of his reign. This off the back of the news that Princess Catherine is hoping to be more visible in the run-up to Christmas. This is great news, isn't it?
It would be wonderful to have them both back in full force and full health. And just hope that they are both genuinely better and not pushing themselves just because of their loyalty and dedication to our country.
Is there a concern that we're rushing them out too quickly, such as our keenness to see them?
I think we've been actually a lot better than might have been true 20 years ago. That the Queen, without a doubt, would have pushed herself to be back out far more quickly than she was ready for. And I think there has been a little more care taken that they have the chance to recover. And I really genuinely just hope
I think
they
the fact too that I think the fact that the King and the Princess have been quite open with what's been happening to them, I think that's made it easier for the public.
Yes,
and I think we've got to, I think we've got to get them back to when they're ready. And I think, we do have a monarchy that is really dedicated to public service. All right, I'm an avowed monarchist. I'll plead guilty. But
Michael, whether you like the monarchy or not, do you think that actually they've got a better hold on this story in terms of the palace and the media side of it?
Yeah, I think so. They seem to be handling it well, and his reign seems to be going well, apart from the obvious personal problems. I mean, the problem they've got is the number of royal players now, because they've lost, they've lost Andrew and Harry, and
they'd slimmed it down anyway. You see,
slimmed down monarchy.
Right.
Well, let me tell you, a slimmed down panel tonight. What a treat!
I'm not slimmed down.
Mainly
I've got to work on that.
Michael and Neil, thrilled to have you in. Really enjoyed your company. Please come back soon. I'll see you on Friday Night Live at 8. Headliners is next. First, the weather, and Greg Dewhurst.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. Low pressure has been in charge, bringing heavy rain and thunderstorms, some localised flooding. It does stay unsettled next week, but the winds turn to a northerly direction and it turns increasingly cold, particularly by the middle of the week. Low pressure at the moment, still giving outbreaks of heavy rain across southeast Scotland, northern England, down into Wales, parts of the Midlands as well. Thundery showers across the southeast. And as we head overnight, this all slowly pushes its way eastward. Still some heavy bursts of rain possible. Drier across Northern Ireland and Scotland with a few showers here. Under the clearest skies across Scotland, temperatures dipping into single figures. Elsewhere, under the cloud and rain, holding up around 12 to 14 Celsius. So much of England and Wales starting quite cloudy, outbreaks of rain, but clearer skies across Scotland. A few showers across the Highlands and Islands, but some bright spells elsewhere. Still some thicker cloud across the southeast with some patchy rain in places. Bright skies across Northern Ireland to start Monday morning, though rather cloudy across much of England. Those sunny spells starting to develop across Wales and the West Country first thing on Monday morning. And then through the day, the bright spells across the west just slowly start to push eastwards. It does mean, though, central eastern parts of England staying cloudiest for longest. The cloud thick enough for some outbreaks of rain at times. Sunny spells across northern England, Wales, the West Country, though starting to cloud over across Northern Ireland and Scotland, with rain arriving in the west later on in the day. Temperatures cooler for all, generally near average for the time of year, 16 to 18 Celsius, perhaps locally 20 towards the southeast. Turning more unsettled on Tuesday as a weather system pushes southeastward, some outbreaks of rain, showers following. The winds picking up, some strong and gusty winds across northern and western parts of the UK as well, and starting to feel colder. And that cold theme continues through the week ahead as well. Temperatures falling below average for the time of year. See you soon.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be the next Great British Giveaway winner with a whopping £36,000 in tax-free cash in your bank account. Imagine getting the winning phone call for that.
You never expect to win.
It was unexpected, of course. I only put in one little entry.
I blocked the phone number to start with.
I would say get your entries in. And if I can win it, anybody can win it.
For another chance to win £36,000